Thanks to our friends at The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/Riiv to receive the top 10 stocks to buy right now. One of the things you might not realize you're getting when you buy shares of Alphabet is a small stake in a lot of really interesting startups and companies that have gone public. Investors are getting that exposure through the company's venture capital arm. There's also another late stage fund that's called Capital G, which I'll get to in a later video. If you want to see that, subscribe here on YouTube to Riiv Investing. But for right now, I want to focus on early stage investments the company has made through this venture capital arm and talk a little bit about what that is and what investors are getting for it. I'm Travis Hoium. Thank you for watching Riiv Investing. Subscribe here on YouTube to get notifications for all my content, and check out fool.com/Riiv for great stock picks from the Motley Fool. Now let's get into exactly what Google Ventures is. This is the Google Ventures page. The venture fund was established in 2009, so it goes back over a decade. It was started with a couple $100 million, but that's now grown to a reported $8 billion that the company has invested. It's really still a very secretive fund, so we don't know exactly if there's outside investors or how much they would own of this fund, but I think it's safe to say that Alphabet as a company gets a vast majority of the upside and has invested a vast majority of the money in the company as well. What I want to dig into here is the portfolio of companies, and I'll put a link to this in the show notes so that you can go find this information for yourself. But just to give you an idea of the scale of Google Ventures, according to Crunchbase, they've made 1,026 investments. We're the lead investor in 276 of those and have exited positions in 231 investments. Exits mean that a company is acquired by another company or it goes public. I'll just go through a couple of those companies. But that's just a massive number of investments that Google Ventures has made over the last 14 years. On the portfolio page, you can get to all of the companies that they've invested in. Some of the spotlight ones here. Stripe, that might be a company that you've heard of. They were one of the earlier investors in Stripe. So that's actually an interesting way to get exposure to a startup that could potentially go public over the next year or two. But there's a long list of companies, including a number that have gone public. I want to go through a few with you here. Amp Robotics is one that I think is really interesting. They're trying to bring AI and robotics to recycling. So really on a mission for sustainability. And this ties into some of the sustainability and health themes that the fund overall has. Another that I think is really interesting, gets even deeper into the startup space, is AngelList. Google Ventures is one of the investors in AngelList. So another way that they're getting even more exposure to really small startups on the angel fund level. This is a really popular way to find really small companies that are looking for small checks on the order of magnitude of tens of thousands of dollars. Maybe not quite at the point where you're going to a venture capital firm, but you're looking for a wealthy individual or a small investor who is willing to take a big risk on a company. So they are one of the investors in AngelList. Another you may have heard of is Cameo. So this is where you can hire an actor or an athlete, some sort of celebrity, to give well wishes or wish happy birthday to somebody. And it is a relatively inexpensive way to get a really interesting cameo video from one of these people. Nextdoor is another app that they have invested in. This is a popular one with people who can communicate with your neighbors, and another one that has talked about going public but hasn't yet, still on the private markets. Another that has gotten a lot of attention is Yuga Labs. So this is the company behind the Bored Ape Yacht Club and that collection of NFTs. Google Ventures is one of the investors there. This is actually a company that's worth a few $1 billion now. NFTs have really gone through a lot over the last few months, but Yuga has held up really well. And one of the reasons is that it's a really well-backed company and really well run. So this is a small way to get exposure to that. Another one that they added an investment to recently is Typeface. And this is going to be another generative AI tool that's a little bit like ChatGPT, but kind of taken to the next level. So you can say, I want to create a social media post and add an image to it, and it will do all that work for you in Typeface. So that's a recent investment for them in the last month. And again, these are the kind of investments that as retail investors, we might not have access to, but you do get a small stake when you own a piece of Alphabet. Let's go through a bunch of the companies that have gone public. This gets into the exits. That's what it's known as in the venture capital world when a company goes public or sells out, basically it's a way for them to monetize the investment that they've made. DocuSign is a company that Google Ventures was an early investor in. Uber, Google Ventures, and Alphabet as a company, including Capital G, made a number of investments in Uber that amounted to hundreds of millions of dollars. So that was a really interesting one for them. Desktop Metal has also gone public. Google Ventures was an early investor there. GitLab is another one that you may have heard of. Robinhood, which went public after tremendous growth earlier in the pandemic. Google Ventures was an investor in that, as were they in Lemonade. Again, this is a stock that has not done particularly well, but they had a great exit, and that was great for Alphabet and Google Ventures. Now, as I mentioned, I will get into Capital G, which is kind of their bigger, later stage fund in a later video. But here's some of the investments that Capital G has made. CrowdStrike, Stripe, Airbnb, Lyft. These are some massive companies, and you may not know that Alphabet has been one of the companies fueling them, and investors get a little bit of exposure there when they own Alphabet stock. Alphabet isn't the only company that has its own venture capital arm. This has become really popular, particularly in Silicon Valley. But there are a number of advantages for making these venture capital investments, especially at a company the size of Alphabet. One, it obviously gives you the financial upside. But for a company like Alphabet, the financial upside for making a $200,000 investment into a startup is probably not going to be all that meaningful given the company's market cap. In fact, in the company's recent 10K filing, these venture investments weren't even mentioned because they're not material to the company's investments and just sort of get lost in the mix. But it can create a really good pipeline for potential acquisitions and talent. Companies like Alphabet has actually acquired a handful of these companies. So they were early stage investors in the startup and then said, hey, it makes sense for us to buy this company or maybe acquire the talent that is working at that company. So this is something that happens over and over again in technology, just an early way to scout a company or people who are working on a technology. The third thing is that this is an early customer acquisition tool for Google Ventures. One of the things that a lot of companies do is say, hey, we will invest in you, but you need to be on G Suite or use Google Cloud. And that can be a way to grow your core business and get growth from the startup phase by investing in those companies early on. And these are also strategic investments. Keep that in mind that these are not necessarily investments that Google Ventures or Alphabet is making to make a ton of money. Like I said earlier, it's not really material to the business given how profitable Google is. So they're trying to find strategic ways to make investments. Now, these investments are not going to be huge money makers for Alphabet as a company given the company's size, but it is a small piece of upside that investors get. And if Google Ventures does a really good job investing this money, it can help expand the company's moat and make sure that they're prepared for the next technological changes. So I mentioned a couple of those AI investments. That's where Alphabet is going to see that investment pay off, is not necessarily in the financial return, but in being able to acquire the company or the talent working at those companies to fend off any competitors. So this is one of the pieces of a lot of these big companies that I think is a little bit misunderstood. It's a valuable piece of what they do. And these venture capital arms are able to operate fairly autonomously and make investments that will pay off 5, 10, 20 years down the road. Alphabet has actually been one of the most successful. It's pretty rare to have a quarter of your venture investments pay off with some sort of exit, but that's what they have done already. I'd love to hear your thoughts about Google Ventures and Alphabet's investments in smaller companies. Leave your comments in the comments section below. Follow Riiv Investing here on YouTube. Thank you for watching. And remember, I'll be back later with a video that looks at Alphabet's investments through Capital G, which is more later stage funds, but huge investments that they've made over the last few years there. So look for that video coming here on YouTube. Thank you for watching, everybody. I'll see you here next time.